Hello, hello. Thank you so much for tuning into this ASMR True Crime Soft Spoken video. Today I'm going to be doing one of those cases that just is so bizarre to me. It's the one that I mentioned in my Q&A. It's the mysterious case of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. This case that I wrote up is super long. I don't know if I will be doing two parts. I kind of split up the case, with the first part being just the information, the case write-up, and trying to have that information be as accurate as possible. The second part is all of the theories, all the information that is put out there, but not 100% if it's accurate. I tried to fact check as best as I could, but there's some in the theories that came from various sources, so we will see. But I went ham on this research, like 10 tabs open, I'm googling stuff, I'm here, I'm there, I'm everywhere. I went in, and this case is intense. Like, oh my gosh, the internet in this case is like, phew. So, okay. Lisanne Froon was born on September 24th, 1991, and was described as being thoughtful, intelligent, empathetic, and a little bit shy. She loved the music, Coldplay, and kept a diary that she wrote in frequently. Kris was born on August 9th, 1992. She was described as being this sparkling, extroverted, cheerful, intelligent, spontaneous, and outspoken person. She loved the theater and the artistic world. She also enjoyed festivals and music, from Pearl Jam and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They both grew up in Amersfoort in the Netherlands. After graduating from high school, both went on to attend the University of Utrecht. I think I said that right. So in 2014, Kris is 21 and Lisanne is 22. Kris had just completed her studies in cultural social education, specializing in art education. And Lisanne had graduated with a degree in applied psychology. Lisanne and Kris had met while working together at the cafe/restaurant called In den Kleinen Hap, and both rented rooms in the same student house. They began discussing the idea of going on a trip with each other for a gap year. They were both really excited about the idea to explore and learn Spanish in another country, while also giving back to a community and volunteering to work with children. So they both began saving money for 6 months and planned to go to Panama together for a special 6-week vacation. And they didn't just want to go on a long holiday, but also do something for the local community and children. So in Holland, they gathered money from friends and family, to buy the children's toys for the Panamanian children they would teach. On March 15th, 2014, Kris and Lisanne got on a plane at Amsterdam Airport to travel to Costa Rica in Latin America. From there, they traveled to Bocas del Toro in Panama. They spent some time on the coast, learning some Spanish and enjoying the local food and drink. And they actually ended up meeting two fellow Dutch travelers who were visiting there at the same time. 2 weeks after arriving in Panama on March 29th, they moved to Boquete, a city on the west side of the country. And then for the final 4 weeks, they arranged to stay with a host family while they worked as volunteers in Boquete, teaching local children in the school and learning Spanish. So Boquete is a small mountain town in Panama. It is about 37 miles from the border of Costa Rica. It's got a lot of green mountain highlands, and because of its elevation, which is 3,900 feet above sea level, the climate is cooler than that of the lowlands. So it's this really scenic location. There's a lot of natural environment that makes it very popular and attractive for tourists and retirees from all around the world. So soon after arriving to their host family, they went to the children's school ARA, where the staff told them they could not work that week as planned. The head of the children's school had other things to do elsewhere, and they had no time or place for them, despite making earlier arrangements. So this was really frustrating for the girls. They had planned everything out for this trip, and they used this Spanish language school to help them organize for this volunteer work. The language school had even sent over a confirmation email on Friday, 3 days before they were supposed to start their volunteer work, confirming that they were going to start on Monday. Lisanne texted her parents that day saying, quote, "We have been sent away and I am really disappointed." A few hours later, Lisanne texted her mother that they were trying to find another spot for them to do volunteer work and that they would go for that. Meanwhile, the girls were going to stay with the local host family. So Miriam Gira was hosting the girls for that 4-week stay. She often housed international students and had a room for the girls in the main house. Miriam described the girls as smart and shy. She stated that the girls were restless. She said on the first evening there, Kris read a book in the girls' bedroom while Lisanne kept Miriam some company in the living room. Despite not speaking very good in Spanish, Lisanne managed to explain to Miriam that they didn't know yet what to do with their newfound free time. The girls eventually did decide to explore the area the next days. So Miriam brought them breakfast in their room on Sunday, March 30th. Their second day in Boquete, and learned that the girls had planned to walk around Boquete and learn more about the place. On Sunday, They had planned all sorts of sightseeing tours for the next week, starting on Wednesday, April 2nd until Saturday. With the help of the staff of the local language school, they had interest in local day tours, climbing the local volcano, visiting a local coffee plantation, and a strawberry farm. But for that Tuesday, they didn't have anything planned. It all started on Wednesday. So, on April 1st, 2014, that Tuesday, both the girls accessed their Facebook profile and let their friends and family know that they would be exploring the clouded forest around the giant active Baru volcano. Baru is the tallest mountain in Panama and the 12th tallest in Central America. It holds a unique position that if you were to climb it up on a clear day, you could see the Pacific Ocean on one side and the Caribbean Sea on the other. Is it Caribbean? That's Caribbean. I don't know. A taxi is said to have picked them up and brought them to the start of the trail. There is some confusion on what exact time this is, but according to the clock on the digital camera they brought along, it shows that they started this hike around 11 in the morning. So, Lisanne and Kris wore light clothing on the day, with just shorts and a tank top. They didn't bring much with them other than a light backpack containing passports, 2 water bottles, a Canon PowerShot SX270 digital camera, and some money, which was I think about $82, and their cell phones, which was an iPhone and a Samsung Galaxy. So they were obviously dressed and packed for a short trip. The area around the trail was very rugged, steep, dangerous, and when you went beyond the trail, it was even more dangerous, particularly during the April to October wet season, where it becomes even more treacherous. And even the indigenous tribe would be careful and tread warily on these trails. The trail runs over a lot of different area, and it crosses over a steep river that can be about 70 feet deep, which has to be crossed over using cable bridges. So it's not anywhere that if you're not a local, even if you are a local, you really need to know this area to be able to walk in this part of the area. So residents report that at the start of the trail, they had actually informed the girls not to walk up by themselves. It had also been told to them during an introduction talk by one of the school staff members to be very careful on this trail and to not go past the trail. But they still made their way to the trails, accompanied by a dog named Blue, or Azul in Spanish, that belonged to the restaurant owners at a restaurant that was located at the start of the trail. Kris and Lisanne reached the summit around 1 p.m. and for some reason they decided to carry on beyond the trail despite those previous warnings. So normally tourists would turn around after this lookout point and just walk down the same path back to Boquet. So suspicion rose when the dog owners declared that Blue returned to Boquet the same day without the 2 girls. It's said that the host family either searched for them that night upon realizing they hadn't returned, or were simply not aware they weren't home and figured that they had been sleeping in the following day. I'm not sure which one is accurate. I saw both, so. Kris and Lisanne were scheduled with a local guide for a private walking tour at 8 a.m. the next day, Wednesday, April 2nd. But they never showed up to this appointment. So the tour guide actually went to look for the girls at the house of the host family. And then later that day, in the early evening, he and the staff member from that language school contacted the authorities and the girls' family. So authorities immediately organized the search crews, and the following day, April 3rd, they began aerial searches. Also, the search groups were organized to search the rainforest where the girls were thought to be hiking. On April 6th, after 4 days of no answers, Kris and Lisanne's parents, together with Dutch detectives, flew to Boquet and started a larger search with specialized search and rescue teams, as well as sniffer dogs, and this went on for another 10 days. But still, no signs of the girls. And so, the parents offered a $30,000 reward for any information. I don't know why, but I always think about the part when I hear about the parents having to travel to the places where their children go missing. I just think how awful that must be. Just sitting in an airplane or a car, just trying to get there and not knowing what's going on. I don't know, I always picture that. I don't know why it's kills me, but the families of both Kris and Lisanne had not heard from their daughter since April 1st. Before that date, the girls had regularly contacted their parents and updated them through calls, WhatsApp messages, text messages, and Skype. Kris had last sent a text message to her boyfriend Steven saying they were going to hike that Tuesday. Kris's mother had sent her a message on Wednesday and had left unanswered. Kris normally responded quick, within an hour, but she remained silent. Kris's father said that they sent another message to Kris on Wednesday evening, asking if all was okay and if she could contact them, but again they heard nothing. About 10 weeks later, on June 11th, a local woman named Irma Mirando found Lisanne's blue lycra backpack and it was handed over to the police on June 13th. Irma and her husband, Louis, found it near a rice paddy stuck between a rock and a river on the bank of the river near the village of Alto Romero. The backpack was located in a remote area about 10.5 miles from Bouquet and about 5 miles from the summit of the trail. It was an estimate that it was like about an 8-hour walk from their last known location. And the village was very remote, which would have been very difficult to reach on foot. Now, there's some reports that the couple may have first cleaned the backpack before handing it over to police, as in rinsing it off, but there was actually some minor dirt found on the bag, but in the media they had said that the bag was described as clean and dry. So there seems like there was some dirt found, but it wasn't anything major. So from the police files, there was actually a report that there was some dirt on the bag, as well as some yellowish brown clay at the end of the strap of the bag, some plant fragments, some loose sand inside the bag, and there was also some translucent plastic fragments found in the bag. So there is uncertainty on whether or not the bag was found wet. So there really is no evidence to say that it was wet at the time it was found. The money bills inside the backpack were dry and not decomposed. The metal parts of the bra located in the bag were not rusted, and the camera still worked. Police assumed the bag had drifted by the river to a spot where the local woman noticed it. But it had been raining heavily in the prior few weeks, and some people believe that the backpack did not look like it had spent weeks in a wet, muddy jungle and river, having endured 72-something days in highly humid rainforest. So inside the backpack were 2 pairs of sunglasses, $83 in cash, Lisanne Froon's passport, a water bottle, 2 bras, both phones, and a camera. A total of 13 DNA samples were reported to have been taken from the straps, zippers, and the edges of the backpack. Some DNA was also found on the bras. Out of the 13 samples, DNA was only found on 3 of those samples. They turned out to belong to multiple people, including at least 2 women and 1 man. But none of those DNA traces ever matched to anyone, and they also did not match to Kris and Lisanne. But their DNA may have been washed off by the river water. So there was a potential that maybe somebody had handled the backpack before it ended up in the water. But local police also did not collect DNA from people involved in the searches, people who found the backpack, people on the search team. So they never verified prints from people who were involved, I could at least rule out, hey, like a bunch of people touched this and it's actually not sus that there's 13 samples. It was just mishandled, but they never went through that process. The Dutch forensic report failed to detect DNA profiles on the phone and camera. Investigators then take a look into the data on both cell phones. So the Samsung phone could be accessed without any problems, while the iPhone suffered water damage, but its memory card could be accessed in a separate device. So they discovered that the phones had remained in service for almost 10 days after the woman disappeared. So over just 4 days, 77 separate attempts have been made to call the police, both via 112, the emergency number in the Netherlands, and 911, the emergency number in Panama. Upon the call logs, police were able to come up with an outline of time the girls spent missing in the forest. So hours after starting their hike, around 4:39 p.m. when it was still light out, the first attempt was made to call emergency services on the day of their disappearance. And 10 minutes later, at 4:51 p.m., a second attempt was made. Both times, the Dutch emergency number 112 was dialed. So 112 is the European emergency number. But if needed, it automatically switches you through to an emergency number in the country you were in, which did work in Panama. But due to the dense jungle, neither attempts went through. Then the phones were powered off at or just after 5:52 for both the iPhone and Samsung. It took 14 hours for another attempt to be made to call emergency services. And in the days that followed, more attempts to dial emergency services were made. On day 2 of their disappearance, on Wednesday, April 2nd, 3 attempts were made at 6:58 a.m., 8:14 a.m., and 10:53 a.m. At 1:50 p.m., the Samsung phone was only powered on and off again. At 4:19, the Samsung was powered on and left on. The Samsung was left powered on through the night of April 2nd and 3rd. On the second day, both phones were used. Alternatively, the iPhone from Kris was used once to call 112 at 8:14 a.m. And there was actually a screenshot photo that was made of the screen being called, perhaps accidentally. Both phones were used, and actually on one of these calls, they actually made a connection at 6:58 a.m. Lisanne's phone connected for just 1 to 2 seconds and then quickly failed. And 36 seconds later, the phone was switched off again. They never managed to get a connection again despite trying several more times. On day 3 of their disappearance, on Thursday, April 3rd, the Samsung phone from Lisanne had been powered. And between 2:21 and 2:41 a.m., the weather application was used on the Samsung phone. Then on 2:41 a.m., applications were used again, but it's not known which ones. By 7:36 a.m., the Samsung only had about 1% battery left and was powered off. At 9:32 a.m., the iPhone was powered on and 911 was called twice. At 9:33 a.m. At 11:47 a.m., the phone was powered on and then powered off again. At 3:59 p.m., the iPhone was powered on and the contact MyTM 00-507-6979 was looked up on WhatsApp. Then the phone was powered off. On day 4, the Samsung phone was powered on and off again. At 4:50 a.m., at 5 a.m., the Samsung phone was powered on and off. The battery of the Samsung phone was now at 0%. It would be powered on day 5 at 1:14 again, unsuccessfully, and then on day 10 at 5:15, but the Samsung Galaxy never booted up properly again. So also on day 4 at 10:16 a.m., the iPhone was powered on and off. At 1:14, at 1:42 p.m., the iPhone was again powered on and off. On day 5, the iPhone was powered on and off at 10:50 a.m. And this is the last time that the password was entered correctly. On day 6, someone had tried to access Kris's iPhone, but the PIN was incorrectly entered. It's claimed that there were 77 attempts made to access the phone between April 7th and 10th. On days 7, 8, and 9, no activity on either phone could be found. On day 11, April 11th, Kris's phone was powered on again at 10:51 p.m. and stayed on for 1 hour and 4 minutes. The phone was then powered off with some battery remaining, but that was the last time it was used. In addition to the phone records, police were also able to obtain the photos from the camera, which provided even more eerie details of the case. Detectives were able to view around 133 consecutive photos, with only one photo missing. The photos that were published looked sharp and fine, and in a sense there was no water damage to the files. So there was no GPS location option on this camera, so investigators could only establish or guess the location of the photos based on the surroundings that were visible. The photos did have a time stamp, however. So the first photos showed the girls in good spirits on April 1st, confirming that the women had taken the trail and wandered into some wilderness hours before their first attempt to call 911. These photos showed no signs of anything unusual. The next set of photos show them just walking through the trail. They reach the summit, and it appears that they may have reached the summit in about less than 2 hours, making them fast walkers. But also there was excellent walking conditions. It was sunny, dry weather, and it had been dry for a long time, which made the trail easy to walk. So, after taking pictures at the top of the summit, they can see that more photos were taken beyond this trail. And based on the police investigation into their computer use and online search history, Kris and Lisanne did research the trail prior to their hike. They also looked up this waterfall that was located just beyond the trail. So perhaps, since they made good time on their hike and had reached the summit, they figured that they would have time to walk towards this waterfall beyond the trail and come back at a reasonable time, despite the warnings to return and not go beyond the trail. Based on the next sequence of photos, it shows that they had wandered onto what's called the Caribbean descent. So, photo image 505 shows Kris bent over, going through kind of like a leafy area. She has like one hand shielding her eyes, looking back. She kind of has her tongue out, I think. So it still seems like it's lighthearted at this point. So at 1:38 p.m., the network connection on their phones was cut off because they had ventured too far from the summit. In image 507, you can see Kris crossing a small stream, seen from the back again. At 1:54 p.m., 8 seconds later, image 508 was taken. So, on the photo of Kris crossing this small stream, it is going towards that small waterfall, but they never picture this waterfall in any of those photos. The girls no longer made like smiling selfies at the point where they had been doing that before. Instead, the photos had shifted into someone, assuming it was Lisanne, taking photos of Kris walking some distance in front. So, Kris looks back at some of these photos, and her facial expression has been called slightly worried by some, although this is open for interpretation. It is the last known photo taken by the girls that day. So, on April 8th, 70s after those initial photos, 90 photos were taken on the camera between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. This meant that the girls had been in the jungle for about a week. It seems that the person who took the photos was maybe seated or laying down, and you can see the trees and foliage coming back in many different photos. A lot of times the camera is aimed at the sky or the tree line. There's one photo that has a twig with 2 red plastic bags, or maybe pieces of a bag stuck on the branches, and there's some trash around it too. Also among these photos is one photo that appears to be the back of Kris's head, which shows a close-up of her blonde hair. This was taken around 1:49 a.m. Many speculate what can actually be seen in this photo. There were a lot of initial reports that indicated there was a head wound or blood in her hair. But upon looking at the photo, there really is no clear indication of that. It seems to prove that Kris was present on the night of April 8th. But the question is then, if Kris was alive by April 8th, then why was there an inability to access her phone with the correct password from April 5th onward? So the photos were taken in quick movements initially. At the time, you could see maybe 7 pictures were taken within 1 minute. Sometimes the photos followed each other every 10 seconds, sometimes every minute. Most of the photos were taken in a cluster between 1:29 and 2 a.m. And then the frequency of the photos went down, and the last known photo was taken at 4:10 a.m. Following the discovery of the backpack, a local guide, with the help of 6 native people, found jean shorts belonging to Kris. There's been different reports on the state of discovery. So the initial report that I think a lot of people heard indicated that the shorts were zipped and neatly folded on a rock. But it seems that there is a corrected official finding that states that it was actually floating in the river. Photos recently were linked that showed Kris's shorts were caught on a tree branch, partially submerged in the river. And about 2 months later, near where the backpack was discovered, they found 1/2 of a pelvic bone broken, which was identified as Kris. They also discovered Lisanne's left foot, which was found intact and inside of her wildebeest boot, showing multiple fractions of the metatarsals. The laces were still tightly laced, and the sock was also inside the boot. The foot still had some skin and flesh on it, and the shoe with the foot was found upstream. Forensic analysis found that the cut on the bone of the foot was surprisingly clean, and that there was no blood found on it. There was also no signs of cutting, hacking, gunshots, or teeth or claw markings. And then at least 33 scattered bones were found along the same riverbank, a few miles from a cable bridge and a dry river stones where some investigators thought the nighttime photos may have been taken. Most of these bones were from a left leg. They saw that the bones were scattered, sometimes miles apart from one another, but following the direction of the river. And then later on August 29th, 2014, Kris's number 10 right rib bone was also found, as well as a femur upper leg bone from Lisanne, and possibly her tibia bone. A rolled up ball of skin from Lisanne's shin was also located. A forensic pathologist later found the skin was still in an early stage of decomposition. And this is 5 months after the girls went missing. The pathologist also found that the bone marrow in the femur and tibia bone from Lisanne proved to be dry and undecomposed, and that the bone marrow was intact. Kris's bones, however, appeared bleached. Her bones contained high levels of phosphorus, which was not present in the soil surrounding the riverbed. So bleaching of the bones can occur in 2 ways. The cleaning of bones with chemicals, making the bones white, or the sun itself can result in bleaching. However, this takes a very, very long time to bleach it naturally by the sun, and it needs direct sunlight. And this was not that much time for bleached bones. And out of all of the bones that they found, only 2 belonged to Kris. It's also interesting that the skulls of the women were never found. If the women decomposed naturally, there should be more bones found, including like larger bones. And a lot of these bones came from the bottom half down. So no cause of death could be determined. There was not enough bones discovered, and the ones that were found didn't have anything on them to reveal a cause of death. So Panama officials ended up closing the case in March of 2015, declaring the 2 died of a hiking accident. Kris and Lisanne's remains were returned to the family and buried at the Rusthof Cemetery in Houston, Netherlands. A memorial was provided in the memory of Kris and Lisanne. Okay, let's just do it. Let's get into the theories and the different speculations of this case. There was so much. I didn't even include all of it, but I included a good bit. And let's get into it because it's the case that I find so bizarre. I broke it up into first talking about some aspects of the discoveries and the cases, and then I go into some timelines and theories. So we'll start with the phone. Of course, there's that 77 attempts, but it's unclear if that was 77 wrong attempts or 77 times the phone was accessed without putting in a password. Either way, it seems to be clear that the iPhone was in Kris's possession between April 1st to 5th, and then after that, it's unknown. So it's speculated that maybe Kris was incapacitated or deceased by April 5th, and Lisanne was left with the phone and had not known the passcode and was trying to gain access to the iPhone, or was just simply using the front screen to try to contact emergency services without unlocking the phone. So I think that part's really just really bizarre. Some people also speculate that maybe a third party wanted access to the phone and was not able to due to not knowing the passcode. That's another speculation, of course. Next, with the camera and the photos, Dutch specialist had tried to undelete the missing photo, which was normally not a challenge because when the image is manually deleted, the whole file isn't actually erased, but they were unable to recover it. The Dutch investigation was almost certain that somebody had deliberately deleted this photo permanently for reasons unknown, but probably with the help of a computer. So, of course, there is the possibility that the girls had deleted this photo and that maybe it had been overwritten and deleted permanently. But some speculate that the Panama authorities had actually taken this photo off the camera themselves because something was on it that they didn't want the outside world to see. But since it's between the normal daytime photos of April 1st and then the mysterious night photos of April 8th, it could be a very important picture. And then the fact that no more daytime photos were taken on April 1st after those initial sets could implicate that either they kept walking and ran into something unexpected, which prevented them from taking any more photos, or maybe they did return and try to go back and just didn't feel like taking any more photos. But there's that big jump between the April 1st photos during the day and then those 90 photos taken on April 8th. And since these photos were taken from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m., they were pretty much in complete darkness and the rain was falling. Some were taken seconds apart, others 15 minutes later. But these shots, some of them appeared to be taken very deliberately, as they were not blurred, which would indicate that they were taken maybe like under some kind of distress. They were very clear, like somebody was holding the camera and taking these shots. So, like they said, there's no clear indication of where exactly these photos were taken, that location site. Even local guides were not able to identify like one location over the other. Everything kind of looked the same, which is such a, it would, if we could know the exact location, that would help just a little bit in some kind of information. But looking at these photos, people have enhanced the lighting, and some people believe that these photos show the photographer looking down at the ravine, but some believe that there's actually like leaves that you can see that the photographer is potentially looking up. Some have speculated that the women were trying to use the camera as a light source in the pitch black, or perhaps to signal potential rescuers, or to even scare away wild animals. The single close-up shot of Kris's head, some think there's some discoloring that could be a sign of blood. Like maybe if Kris had experienced some kind of injury, Lisanne may have taken a picture of the back of her head so that they could look at the photo and examine and see if there was any kind of injury. Some look at this photo and they say that you can actually make an outline of a nostril and a mouth. There's also some that say there's potentially some darker hair in the corner that would not belong to Kris and perhaps would actually belong to Lisanne. So some theorize that in this picture you may see Kris and Lisanne laid on top of one another, and somebody took a close-up of both the girls, either injured or dead. So if this is the photo, this would mean that Lisanne is laying up. Kris would be face down to the side of her, with her hair covering Lisanne's face. Some people also think that perhaps the outlines do belong to Kris, and if you flip the photo, it may be Kris face up with her hair over rather than the back of her head. Now I wonder if it's one of those things where it's being pointed out so I can see it. I don't know if I see it. But a lot of people have so many speculations around that photo. But regardless, Kris's hair is pretty clean and dry. There's no obvious sign of blood or any kind of injury, and her hair is pretty clean. There's some people who are saying that, going by the way the hair is falling, she may be either standing or sitting upright in this photo. But it does still have that weird part about, who was sitting up for 3 hours out in the open, in the rain, in the dark, taking all these photos. After no photos for a week, these photos are suddenly taken. The photos seem pretty steady, and almost appears that there's this clear documentation of the location that the person taking the photos was in. The part that's really strange is that not a single photo can indicate who is exactly taking this photo. It could be Lisanne, it could be Kris, and it could be somebody else. So, now with the backpack, the big thing about the backpack is, was this backpack wet or dry? Because the authorities and the way that it was reported being discovered was it was seen on the riverbank. And the fact that the backpack was in pretty good conditions after 10 weeks in the jungle is very suspicious to people. The fact that the electronics were not damaged to the point of not being able to be used was very suspicious. I did see one report saying that one of the guides who was present when they opened the backpack told podcast makers that he saw that the backpack was wet. It was in really good shape for those 10 weeks. And he said that he saw the cell phones and money being taken out of plastic bags. I've never seen this reported anywhere, but I wanted to throw it in because perhaps Kris and Lisanne had carried their devices in protective plastic bags. That helped, but still the state of the backpack, I think, is something that has a lot of speculation around it. So for the bones and the remains, the places where the rib, pelvic, and foot bones were roughly found indicate that Kris and Lisanne would have passed at least 2 rivers to get to this region, which would have been a pretty intense trek. The rate of decomposition and whether or not they were found in water would all play a role. The Panama forensic anthropologist later claimed that under magnification, there were no scratches of any kind on the bones, neither of nature nor cultural origin, and there were no marks on the bones at all. So had natural decomposition of the body near a river had the bones go through that process, the bones would be heavier than water. So they would sink to the bottom of the river, and then they would have been scratched along the riverbed, which would have made some markings on the bones. So this meant that a lot of people think that the bones were not in the river at any point because there was no scratches or markings on them. And so, with the skin discovered in an early state of decomposition 5 months afterwards, the anthropologist specialist also said that it did not seem to be a part of the natural process of decomposition that would occur out in nature. He said that the shape of the skin was rounded and may have been acquired by a stain in a bag or some kind of container, and it just seemed like this piece of skin would have been manipulated. And for Kris's 2 bones, a lot of people think this is linked to a chemical bleaching procedure because there was no known natural source of phosphorus in the area, and Lisanne's bones did not have phosphorus on it that's been reported, so it was just Kris's bones, it seems. The Panama investigators had officially suggested that the phosphates came from perhaps, quote, stomach acids of large animals who may have swallowed the bones and then expulsed them again. I don't know if an animal would have shit out a pelvic bone. I don't know about that one. So, there are 5 stages of decomposition. Kris's remains reached the 4th stage of advanced decomposition, and bizarrely, Lisanne's remains were only between the 1st and 2nd stage. So, we go along the speculation that the girls supposedly died within the same time frame. So why was there such a big difference? So some specialists said that in the cloud forest, temperatures were cool at that time of year, or cool enough to not show such a late stage of decomposition. The bones that were retrieved, scattered around, were far apart from one another along the river. So some people suggest that the animals must have dragged the bones around. It is bizarre that they would have left a whole foot behind. Others say that the bodies ended up in the river and then were dragged along the river, I guess causing the bone fragments to, I think some of them were maybe in water, out of water. That's another part that I think I'd really like to know, because if they're all on land, which I think most of them were, how do they get from the river to the land? Does it naturally happen? I don't know, but others say that it's highly unlikely that 2 adult human bodies are going to be broken up this badly after such a short stretch of distance, and the river was not flowing very fast at this time of year. A lot of people who have had similar deaths were not in pieces. And it's also bizarre, like if the river was strong enough to tear up the bones, then how did the backpack remain mostly unharmed and undamaged? Okay, so now we're going to get into the timelines. There are two main theories in the case. One that Kris and Lisanne suffered an accident, got lost, and died from natural causes. The second that they were attacked by someone or a group and were met with foul play. So I'm going to walk you through those theories in accordance to a timeline. And the first theory we'll do is that they died from dehydration from contaminated water or from natural causes. So the girls had become lost while in the jungle and began roaming around the area trying to find a way back to the trail. And as the days progressed, they tried to call for help numerous times while shutting off their phones, trying to save battery. By April 6th, Kris maybe suffered impaired cognitive state from dehydration and was unable to open her phone or say what the passcode was. And this caused Lisanne to have to try and attempt to open up the phone on her own. And then on the night of April 8th, Lisanne takes pictures of the back of Kris's head. Perhaps Kris was suffering symptoms of dehydration and hit her head. Lisanne took a picture to make sure there was no injuries. Then Lisanne takes the 90 pictures. Maybe she was calling for help to see if there was a plane, helicopter, or light, or noise. She was pointing to the sky, hoping that someone would see the flash. And then on April 9th, at some point, the girls moved from the location where they had taken the pictures by the riverbank the night before. And Kris perhaps dies soon after, and Lisanne is left on her own. She's exposed to the elements, she's scared, and she's just trying to do what she can at this point. On April 10th, she's maybe severely weak. She's also dehydrated. She perhaps is ill and delirious and has maybe been drinking the water in the area which could have been contaminated. And on April 11th, Lisanne is still possibly alive, but not in good shape. She maybe manages to gain some consciousness at around 10:51, turning on that cell phone one last time for an hour. And she closes the phone and perhaps passes away. And I suppose the remains being scattered would be from animals in this theory, but there's never really any backup to why this theory is just one part. There's the other theory that they experienced a severe fall. This is the one that the Panama police have indicated. So in this theory, the girls would have been together throughout the 10 days, both experiencing a progression of impacts from the elements and being lost. During the night of April 8th, perhaps they started to panic. They may have utilized the camera to signal for help or to scare away the animals throughout the night. From April 9th to 10th, this may have been where one or both of the girls sustained an injury or became cognitively impaired. And perhaps at some point either both fell from the top of the cliff into the river, causing those severe injuries to Lisanne's foot and to Kris's pelvis. Or perhaps Kris fell from the cliff, causing Lisanne to be alone and attempting to open up that phone one more time on April 11th. And then maybe she eventually fell or jumped in as well, perhaps maybe throwing the backpack off to the side. And then the water would have moved the bodies throughout the stream, and the decomposition would have happened, I guess, within the water, and would have resulted in the scattering of the bones. Okay, so to the timeline for the theory that it was foul play. So on April 1st, the girls set out on their hike. Despite the warnings not to go beyond the trail, they had their research and they wanted to see that waterfall. So they go on, they continue taking pictures and walking along towards the waterfall direction. This is where they can perhaps meet someone or a group of people who are maybe either following them quietly or acting in like this intimidating way that begins to gradually creep them out. But they're trying to like maintain being okay and just kind of moving forward. And the reason why Kris and Lisanne started calling emergency services was because they were being followed and kind of forced deeper into the jungle. And perhaps at this point they are, captured and threatened, and now in the jungle with a person or a group of people threatening them. As the night progresses, on April 8th, the photos were perhaps taken by a third person. There's nothing to suggest that the girls are still alive at this time. There's no goodbye messages or photos or pictures of them clearly. The only photo is of Kris's hair. So perhaps this is the theory that it's just a picture of the back of Kris's head, picture of both the girls, picture of Kris's hair pulled forward, but there's no way to know if they're alive or dead at this point. Perhaps too, the girls maybe have gotten access to the camera and in distress began taking pictures, flashes and stuff like that to either signal or, but again, the pictures were pretty steady, which I think people think that is hard to feel like they are taking these photos in distress because they would have been blurry. But so maybe at some point the person could have taken a picture of Kris standing up or walking in like this really creepy way. So kind of a sub-theory off of this is that they originally did get lost as suspected, and they weren't led into the jungle by someone, but they did organically get lost. And perhaps on the night of April 8th, they are dehydrated and just stuck. They begin using the camera as a way to see where they are since it's pitch black. Some believe that in these photos you can actually see cables in the background, which is an indicator that they were potentially near the monkey bridge. The monkey bridges are these kind of like dodgy few wires that stretch over the river. And the monkey bridge, that I think there was 3 of them, but if they were on near these, they could potentially be near the main trail. So perhaps they were actually able to get back to a trail. There's a trail that actually also goes towards Alto Romero, which is that small town. And this town was only about 20 homes or cottages. And it was located just east of where the remains were found. So Feliciano Gonzalez, who was a local tour guide, was apparently one of the last people to see the girls before they went missing. And he was apparently the tour guide who came to the house, searched the room, notified the police. He was like very involved. I thought it was kind of weird that they didn't show up and he went to their house. Like, people no-show. I figured as a professional you just figure people no-show, but so he actually owns a farm in Alto Romero, and I saw some reports, again, I don't want to say these are facts, this is why they're in the theories, that his son was suspected to be potentially linked to the gangs in the area. So perhaps the girls found this village after being lost and ran into either this tour guide or some gang members, and instead of getting help they ended up being captured and killed. So the girls could have been taken to a different place, either being killed later or killed and then moved. Perhaps Kris was murdered first, sustaining the severe injuries to her pelvis. And in an attempt to limit Lisanne's mobility, they crushed her foot on top, causing those 3 broken bones. And then when it came time to eliminate the evidence, the perpetrators had limited options because the search crews and media crews were pretty active soon after. So perhaps they brought the bodies to the farm or like a wooded area and used tools and chemicals to dispose of the bodies as well as they could. Their bones were then scattered there by someone on purpose. Perhaps some bones were put to confirm that the girls were dead and to draw attention away, but they covered up most of the remains to limit the ability to see any injuries. And either the backpack was then placed downstream in an effort to attempt to retrieve the $30,000 reward, or use it as a marker to hint at where the bones could be found. I saw some places saying that the guide was pretty involved in the discovery of these bones. I don't know if it was him specifically or another one. That's where all this information gets mixed. I think people take something and go with it, but some people have said, like, it's kind of sus that this guy is like, oh, I found these bones, I found this, so perhaps like he's like kind of using like the backpack and things like that as like, oh, look what I found kind of thing. And then either the perpetrator removed photo number 509 because the photo was incriminating, or the police accidentally deleted it, or the police purposely deleted it. So people think that the deletion was intentional, meaning that this photo would have given some kind of information or evidence. And of course I can't verify all this information, but some circulations regarding a pattern associated with the gang members and deaths around the time of the disappearance has been noted. So Osman Venezuela disappeared a few days after the girls were reported missing. He was later found to have died from drowning, though there is some speculation this was homicide. Allegedly on his phone there was a, quote, swimming photo, which is where much speculation surrounding the deaths relating to the girls stem from. A lot of people believe that in this photo it's a group of, I think, 2 or 3 young men and 2 young women in like a waterfall kind of area, swimming area. Some think that this is Lisanne and Kris. This has never been verified. Jose Manuel Marquez was killed the following year in a hit-and-run collision, and he actually worked for Osman. Leonardo Arturo Gonzalez Mastinu was supposedly that taxi driver who brought the girls to the trail, and he was also found drowned the following year. So while these individuals may have connections with one another, Osman and Jose were supposedly a part of this youth gang. There's no evidence that they had any connection with the girls' disappearance. So, that is the mysterious case of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. I would really like to know what you guys think about this case. There's so much information. I wish I could 100% know what's the correct information, but if anything is incorrect, please feel free to correct. And I really don't know. It's one of those cases where I have no idea. I can go down all the routes and be like, well, that makes sense, and then that doesn't make sense, and then this one makes sense, but that doesn't make sense. So it has me so confused. And these girls were so young. They just seemed like really sweet, positive young women. I see a lot of people criticizing certain things, but they were just in their 20s trying to enjoy their life. I feel so much for their parents, and just the circumstances around this case are so heartbreaking when you have something, no answers, the brutality of it. So I can't even imagine, but thank you so much for tuning into this case, and I hope you're having a good day or good night wherever you are, and I hope you have a good day tomorrow, and I'll see you in my next video.